Good morning, everybody. Good to see you. Good to be back. How is everybody this morning? I see the chatter already. Armored Raven, Squiffy Bear, Rick Bowser. So good to see you guys. Northbound, come alive, and Mama Chose Joy will not be joining us. Sad, sad. Stacia, good to see ya. All right. I'm excited. I found some good stuff even just this morning on one of our topics. Let me put the topics up for you guys so you can see what I see. And we'll start talking about what you guys want to do today. All right. So the topics I have right now, of course, are from previous sessions that we never got to, and I apologize for not being here last week. And I couldn't even post an interim video, so that's just how things go sometimes. Let's see here. I'll show you the topic list right now, and you guys feel free to add to it or replace things on it. There we go. So as far as today so far, and this is stuff that already existed, we have King Melchizedek and all that I know or have found out about him so far, because it's a interesting and fun dig, but I'll show you what I have found and we'll come to some conclusions. Jeriel had mentioned this question, is God calling us to be rich? And I don't see Jeriel yet, but if he joins, we can definitely do this. I think this will not be a long one. Then Mama Chose Joy wanted to do Joshua 10 and the sun standing still. So she said earlier, just in the chat, that she would not be on today. So I don't know if I want to do it without her, but I might just do it so that it's there and she can come back and watch it if she wants, but we'll see. So you guys go ahead with any of your topics. I see Squiffy Bear, you've asked, what does the Bible say about usury? Usury in the Bible. That's a good one. Definitely one I think we should talk about for a number of reasons. Northbound Believer, you ask, would love to get your opinion on the apocryphal books. I'm assuming you mean whether they're valid or whatever, the authority of the apocryphal books. Yeah, we can talk about that. I can talk about it. Yeah, it brings to mind immediately, that's something I've said before, which is I need to get both a reading plan of those books and writings that I think is valuable for people, and then also it would be good if I would kind of put them in some kind of rating system so that, I could say, yeah, this one I really value a lot, I think is very authoritative, this one not so much, all that stuff. So but we can still have a little conversation about it. I can talk about some of the different writings that I think are important. Katie Turner, good morning to you and your mom. It's good to see y'all. C. Jones, good morning, sir. This topic came up twice this week in conversations you had, and that is, how do we reconcile Old Testament scriptures that describe Yahweh the same that the New Testament describes Satan, the beast, the dragon? C. Jones. You'll have to give me references because I don't know what that is. Give me a reference or two. Maybe we'll talk about it. To be honest, that discussion has kind of gotten under my skin the last couple weeks. I've had a couple people that I feel like, I've been working with these people for a long time. I connect with some of you guys, and, to be fighting these stupid Gnostic beliefs again and again and again is just, it's mind-boggling. Like, where does this insipid seed get planted? And it's so hard to get it out of people's heads. But C. Jones, if you have a Bible reference in the Old Testament to something that sounds like the dragon in the New Testament, I'm happy to talk about that verse. But to be honest, I'm getting pissed. I'll just be frank with you. I'm getting tired of dealing with that crap. But I mean, I don't mind addressing it because I'll knock it down in a heartbeat. So, okay. So this is a pretty good list right now. Anything else you guys want to get in? C. Jones, you're like, now you're backing off. I didn't mean to. It's been hard. Like, it's really something that has shaken me to, not in any sense that Gnostic belief system has any validity. In fact, when I go deeper into it, the more I find that, and Katie Turner knows this because we've been talking about a lot of things too, as far as where did some of the beliefs come from, both Gnostic and just some of the modern scientific beliefs. It all seems to be rooted and stemmed in the same thing, and that is the imaginations of the human mind. It really does. So I'll push it. If you push to next week and you get me a reference or two, then I'll address it. But I just wanted to say that because this has really hit me hard in the last couple of weeks. Actually, last week when we didn't do this live stream in particular, I was discussing with this one person this topic, and it's tearing people apart. I don't know why it's so insipid. It gets stuck in people's minds and they can't let it go. You know, something about God being evil, some kind of stupid ass crap like that. You can't untie the New Testament from the Old Testament. So all the people, even on this call right now, that are thinking there's some difference between the God of the Old Testament and the God of the New, you can't do that. All the writers, including your Savior, Jesus Christ, referenced that God in the Old Testament. So get it out of your head. Stop it. Just stop. That's all I got to say. I'm going to say that right now. I just think it's important that we destroy those ideas. Destroy them. They're rooted in evil. And just because someone sees one conflict between something that was written 4,000 or 5,000 years before Christ and something that was written in the first century, oh heavens, even in a different language, oh no. Maybe you should really study those languages and figure out if it's truly a conflict. Some of the times the verses people bring up to me, they don't even say the same things. When you even start to dig into the ancient language, it's just not the same. And then, you know, one thing that really, I'm just going to harp on this. One thing that just irritates me to no end, and I thought about this, I thought through this really hard, and I came to this realization, like, okay, these people are mostly preteristic. They think that 70 AD was significant, right? But then they say, but the God of the Old Testament was vindictive and judgmental and vengeful. What do you think happened in 70 AD? What do you think happened? It was essentially punishment. And it was one of the worst ones that ever been exacted. It was on God's own people. And Jesus was part of that. So if you think the God of the Old Testament is vindictive and the God of the New Testament is all love and bubbles, you got a problem. You got to reconcile the two. You can't just look at one verse in the Old Testament, say, see, mean God. And then look at Jesus teaching about love in the New Testament, say, ooh, see, happy, love God. Different God? Bullshit. Sorry. It's bull. You're not taking the totality of Scripture into your analysis if you're thinking that way. So I'm sorry to curse or be crude, but I'm tired of the discussion, really. But it's something that I guess is super important. Like, apparently this, in fact, I wouldn't be surprised if this is a plant in YouTube, in the content they promote, in the minds of the weak-minded, the MK Ultra victims that are now YouTube influencers. It feels like there's this push for that kind of a belief system. And I think they, I don't know how much to say about it, but if you believe the way I do that Satan is crafting a plan just the same as God is trying to craft a plan, Satan's plan is to divert or twist anything we're going to do into he's going to twist. There's a wave of preteristic understanding, of historical understanding of Christ's fulfillment of the Old Testament right now. And it's all over the internet. It's all over the world. Wouldn't it be nice for Satan if he could twist that into a Gnostic belief pattern? Wouldn't it be nice? Because he's been trying to do it since the time of Christ and before, actually. So, yeah, Lindsay, we're right on your avenue there with the yeah, it came up, and I'm discussing it, Lindsay, because I've been really inundated with people asking me about this stuff. Northbound Believer, you say that's full preterism, isn't it? I don't know that per se what I'm talking about is full preterism, but I think it can lead you there. I think, yeah, I don't know. Lindsay Ball, you say full preterism is Gnosticism. Squiffy Bear, you keep hearing people say, I believe in God and Jesus, just not the Bible. What exactly? How can you do that? How can you know anything about Jesus if you don't know the Bible? It doesn't make any sense. People's minds are mush right now. I don't get that. I guess we're in this strange time where everybody's confused. Nobody's looking and actually evaluating evidence, which is what we try to do here. And they're not leaning on evidential arguments. Instead, they're like, oh, the coolest idea today. And then they're like, that's definitely it. I'm definitely right. You're all wrong. and they're like excited about that. I came up with a cool idea and I'm brighter than anyone else. I mean, what the heck is this? Got so many weird ideas out there right now. Armored Raven, you say Gnosticism involves Ein Sof, Sophia, and the Demiurge. Yeah, and man, like Ein Sof, that came along in the 12th century. Like, that's really late. So Gnosticism evolved over the centuries. Of course, Kabbalah used it and leaned on it. Kabbalah came about 1,000 years after Christ or more. Okay, with roots back in Gnosticism and in ancient Persia. Okay, but that wasn't the same exact thing. It just was born out of it. So there's been an evolution of that whole thing. And in fact, I think, maybe the ancient roots are Egypt, right? With Hermeticism and whoever Hermes Trismegistus is, they don't even know really who he is, but it's an assumed figure in ancient Egyptian history. Yeah, all that stuff, it has grown and morphed over the years and centuries and millennia, and it's almost like now it's again morphing to try to again divert Christianity. Is that truly the root of the wiles of Satan? I mean, to me, it feels like it. That's what I keep running into. The Gnostic type influences, the influence of the Stoics before them, and all of this ancient philosophical thought, which was, of course, man-based and not God-based. It's like in their minds, they came up with their own system apart from God, and it worked for them, but it was really Satan in the background twisting reality, twisting them to trust themselves instead of God, and then it just evolved over time. And it's still here, it's still with us, and I'm apparently going to have to fight it every day right now, because people are frighteningly confused. Frighteningly. Armored Raven, you say goes back to Babylon. Hermes is Thoth and Enoch or Metatron. Babylon's definitely probably the root of a lot of that. Probably true. No one talks about, but Babel is what became Babylon. And it's the same location, really, I believe. And so the etymology of those words give us hints, right? Lindsay Ball, the Gospel of Judas threw me out of Gnosticism. Interesting. I think I need to read the Gospel of Judas. I don't know if I've read through that. I may have. It was a while back if I did. Armored Raven, you say later books of Enoch are compromised to thread in Gnostic beliefs. It's interesting. I've read, I think, 1st, 2nd, 3rd Enoch and the fragments of Noah, and I don't know. I'd have to check them out again. You may be correct. The Northbound Believer, the devil is the author of confusion. I agree with that. It's working. Squiffy Bear, the daily rapid consumption of data through the internet is absolutely screwing with people's minds. Yes, that's what I see, Squiffy. And it's, oh my gosh. It's like the conspiracy of the day right now. Like, every day there's something. And then, I mean, it's turning people's minds into mush. It's like they're not used to consuming information like that. And I feel like maybe I'm a little more used to it just because of my job, like software development. We're learning new stuff all the time. It's changing on us all the time. It's really frustrating, actually. So we've had to be that way where we're evaluating things, picking new technologies, checking stuff, and seeing what works best. So I think maybe that gave me a one-up on some people in this time we're in, like you're saying, where it's just 20 different news stories are relevant and important every single day now. It's crazy, and people are going crazy. I wish it would honestly stop. I wish it would stop, but it's not going to anytime soon. There's a lot more coming. I'm just reading some comments here, guys. Northbound, you said, I heard that we take in more information in 24 hours than someone 100 years did in their whole life. Yeah, just think if you lived on the farm back in the day, you'd wake up, there'd be no television and no phone in your hand. You'd wake up, you'd wander around the house, groggy for a few minutes, you'd find some food, and then you'd walk out to get the eggs out of the chicken house and feed the goats and whatever, and do a few things, and you come back and you sit on the porch because you were tired. That would take you into the afternoon time. Then you might try to figure out something fun to do, like go down to the watering hole and swim. And you would have not in the whole day considered all the silly, stupid things that we have to think about all the time. Just think about that. Think about what that would be. I mean, I really kind of yearn for that, but I'm sure if I had that, like tomorrow, that was my day, I would think I was bored. It would be such a cold turkey change, right? No matter how much I think I would like that, I'm sure that I would immediately feel like, I would get antsy. I would get, it would take a while to get used to it again. And I hope that happens, honestly. I would love it. I would love it long term. Short term, it'd be tough. Whoa, my cup's going nuts there in the video key. All right. Yeah, life without cell phones was funny. When you actually had to walk to the phone and pick it up and it was attached by a cord, so you were like, you'd get as long a cord as you could so you could go in the other room. Like you get the 25-foot or 50-foot cable phone cords. Yeah, it's kind of funny. Oh man. All right, let's go back to topics and let me see. Let's pick what we're gonna do. Now that I derailed the whole thing. Oh, All right. So I kind of want to do Melchizedek because I was studying that this morning to get it kind of to a point, and I feel good about where I am. I think it's interesting. So I think we could talk about Melchizedek probably first, and then I'm going to bump Jeriel and Mama Chose Joys because they're not here. That's the only reason. They're good topics. Usury in the Bible and authority of the apocryphal books, we can talk. King Melchizedek will take just a minute because there's a lot of information. And so unless anyone has any objections, we'll start with Melchizedek. All right, here we go. King Melchizedek. Oh, let me get that on the board. Let's get it on the board. King Melchizedek. Man, I don't know. Are people interested in this guy? I wonder if I'm going to get hits on this video because of that. I don't know. Some people are really interested in this guy. Some people not so much. All right. King Melchizedek. Let's see. Melchizedek. So just for a second to just talk about King Melchizedek's name, I think it's interesting. It's this combo of Melchi and Zedek. Now, Zedek was said to be in, let's see, I think down here in my material. I don't know. This material, I don't 100% know that I trust. This is some Jewish material. They said Zedek was actually an ancient name of Jerusalem, which I'm not sure I believe that. But that's what they say. Say it might be connected with the Phoenician word, blah, 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 which is Jupiter. Now, that's an interesting thing to see. I don't know if I agree with this. There's some references in, I think, the Targum. Interesting. I don't know about that. So it's interesting. That's all I can say. Interesting information. Now, the other thing about his name is, you know, when we're trying to figure out where does this name come from or what is related to it, there is also another king in the Bible with a similar name. And that name is Adonai-Zedek, and it's from Joshua chapter 10, verse 1 through 3. So let's do this. Let's go to Joshua 10, and let's read a little bit about these kings. So let's go Joshua 10. So actually Adonai-Zedek, and you may, like me, be thinking, wow, Adonai-Zedek, that's pretty interesting because Adonai was a word used for the Lord. Well, it means the same thing. It's the Hebrew word Adonai, means master. And so Adonai-Zedek was said in some of the things I looked at to mean master of righteousness or master of peace. And again, I don't know in what sense this Zedek word means righteousness or peace, but apparently there's some kind of connection there. But it's just interesting. So let's read the first few verses of Joshua chapter 10 here. And I think you guys can see that pretty well. So we'll go ahead and start in verse 1. Now it came to pass when Adonai-Zedek, king of Jerusalem, had heard how Joshua had taken Ai and had utterly destroyed it, as he had done to Jericho and her king, so he had done to Ai and her king, and how the inhabitants of Gibeon had made peace with Israel and were among them, that they feared greatly, because Gibeon was a great city, as one of the royal cities, and because it was greater than Ai, and all the men thereof were mighty, probably Nephilim in this case. It says the word here is Gibor, and you may know of the word in Hebrew, Giborim, was generally a term for either mighty men or men of stature, like tall men, giants, essentially. Verse 3, wherefore Adonai-Zedek, king of Jerusalem, sent unto Hoham, king of Hebron, unto Piram, king of Jarmuth, and Japhia, king of Lachish, and Debir, king of Eglon, saying, come up unto me and help me, we may smite Gibeon, for it has made peace with Joshua and the children of Israel. Therefore the 5 kings of the Amorites, the king of Jerusalem, which was Adonai-Zedek, king of Hebron, Jarmuth, Lachish, Eglon. They gathered themselves together and went their hosts and encamped before Gibeon and made war against it. So now I want you to think about the time period we're talking about here, where Adonizedek and Melchizedek both existed. This is one of the oldest time periods in the Bible, just after the flood. So these are the kings of the mightiest cities that the world had ever known. And these are the kings before kings. Like, I don't know how to explain that well enough, but these are the oldest, like just after the flood, where it talks about in Genesis that after the flood, Noah's sons each spread out and started building cities of their own. These are those kinds of people, not far removed from those guys. So these are some of the most ancient, most mighty kings that ever reigned on earth. So it's just an interesting piece of context you need to think about. So Melchizedek, let's go to Genesis 14 and just read what it says about him particularly before we move on. Melchizedek. Yes. And the king of Sodom, verse 17, Genesis 14:17. The king of Sodom went out to meet him after his return from the slaughter of Chedorlaomer. I think I said that right. Chedorlaomer. It's hard to say. And the kings that were with him in the valley of Shaveh, which is the king's dale, and Melchizedek, king of Salem, brought forth bread and wine, and he was the priest of the Most High God. Melchizedek, again, king of Salem. So if you remember, Adonizedek was also king of Salem. So this is just, first it was Adonizedek, and down the line it was Melchizedek, who was the king of this place, Salem, which most scholars think is related to Jerusalem. And that last part of that word, Salem, is actually shalom. It's peace or righteousness. And it's the same letters. It's just the way the English gets transliterated from Hebrew. But it's the same letters for both words. Shalom and Jerusalem. It's the same thing. So Melchizedek, king of Shalom, and Adonizedek was before him also the king of Shalom, or Salem. But Melchizedek brought forth bread and wine, which is an interesting thing. He brought forth bread and wine. He was the priest of the Most High God. And he blessed Abraham and said, "Blessed be Abram of the Most High God, possessor of heaven and earth." This verse will be more important as we continue our discussion. But he blesses Abraham, the possessor of heaven and earth. And blessed be the Most High God, which has delivered thine enemies into thine hand. He gave tithes of all. So Abram, of the spoils of this war against, was it Sodom? Yeah, I think. Or no, it was against this Chedorlaomer king. But the spoils of this war, remember this too, this is the spoils of the war. So a lot of people will point to this, I just want to say it ties into the understanding of what a tithe is, because this is the first recorded tithe. We're going to see in a second where does it say? King of Sodom said to Abraham, "Give me the persons and take the goods thyself." And Abraham said to Sodom, "I've lifted up my hand to the Lord the Most High, possessor of heaven and earth, that I will not take from a thread even to a shoe latchet, and I will not take anything that is yours, lest I should say, I have made Abram rich, save only that which the young men have eaten, the portion which went with me, Aner, Ashel, Mamre, and let them take their portion." But this is the only and first recorded tithe. Let me see if it, well, I know that this is true. Sorry. Why am I not seeing it? Verse 20. Why was I not seeing it? It's in verse 20. Oh, is it not going down? Oh, yeah, okay. Blessed be the Most High God. which has delivered thine enemies. And then Abram gives him tithes of all the spoils of war. So I just wanted to mention that, because in the whole discussion of tithes, people will bring up all sorts of things about, that it's supposed to be of your income or this or that. But this was the spoils of a war that God had put into Abram's hand. Like, he had given him the victory. And then Abram, on the flip side of the war, of the spoils that were just taken, he gives a tenth to Melchizedek. So just be aware of how that worked, and that it wasn't necessarily like what we think of as just income. Like, you worked, you went out in the field, you worked, you were paid for your work, and I need to now give 10% of that to a king. It's a little different than that. So just recognize the difference in the passages about this. So anyway, this is Melchizedek and Abram's interaction. And so it's very interesting. A lot of people say, for many reasons, that because Melchizedek is the king of Salem, or because of the bread and wine, or he's the priest of the Most High God. And then some of the stuff we're going to read in Hebrews in just a second, they'll say that he was a type or a figure of Christ. I don't even know what people really mean by that. Now, I mean, maybe in saying that he's a type of Christ, they're saying he foreshadowed Christ, not that he was Christ. But when people say he was a figure of Christ, a lot of people mean they think he was Christ incarnate before Christ came on earth a second time, right? So it gets complicated then if you try to make that statement. I think I have a different conclusion, and we'll talk through more of it as we go, but just this is where it starts, right, with Melchizedek. Now, in Psalm chapter 110, there's a mention of Melchizedek. So let's just read that. It's very short. Psalm 110. So many Psalms. 110. Okay, this is the prophecy. This is prophecy. Okay, David didn't just write songs. Okay, David wrote prophecy. And so this is where it says, the Lord said to my Lord, the Yahweh said to my master, sit thou at my right hand till I make my enemies my footstool. So this is about Christ in this section. Then Yahweh will send the rod of his strength out of Zion. Rule thou in the midst of thine enemies. The rod of his strength, he's still talking about Christ. The people shall be willing in the day of thy power. In the beauties of holiness from the womb of the morning thou hast the dew of thy youth. And in the same passage he says, verse 4, the Lord has sworn and will not repent or change. He's sworn to do this. And he says, thou art a priest forever after the order of Melchizedek. Okay, so this is interesting. We have to understand what's happening in these passages. And we're going to see this again in Hebrews. God is giving David a prophecy. So this is really God speaking. And he's saying in the same sentence or sentences, he's talking about Christ and he's talking about Melchizedek. So just rationally, logically, they are not the same person, period. Okay, and we'll see this again reinforced even more in Hebrews. So the Lord has sworn and will not change. Thou art a priest forever. After what order? The order of Melchizedek. Okay, and that's interesting. Maybe there's more we can think about here, because that is prior to the establishment of the Levite priesthood. Prior to that. So it's just interesting. All right, so that's the mention in Psalms, and this is actually going to be referenced twice in Hebrews. So we have to recognize that what we just talked about is relevant here, and it's relevant in Hebrews. So let's jump to Hebrews real quick. Hebrews, I think it's chapter 7. I think it starts in 6. Yep. Might start in 5. Hang on. Yes. It starts in 5. I mean, really, to understand it all, it's actually at the end of chapter 5, all the way through chapter 6 and some of chapter 7. But we're not going to read all of it. I just wanted you to see all of it. So in chapter 5 of Hebrews, verse, let's see. Let's just start in verse 9. Of course, this is talking about Christ in this passage. Well, let's start in verse 6. As he said also in another place, you are a priest forever after the order of Melchizedek. So again, it's talking about Christ glorified not himself to be made a high priest, but said unto him, thou art my son, today I have begotten thee. He that said unto him. So this is God saying to him, you are my son, today I have begotten you. This happened before creation, when Christ was begotten of the Father. And he said, you are my son. As you know, Christ came out of God. He said, you are my son. And then he said in another place, meaning in Psalm 110, verse 4, you are a priest forever after the order of Melchizedek. And though he were a son, yet he learned in obedience by the things which he suffered, and being made perfect or complete, he became the author of eternal salvation, called of God a high priest after the order of Melchizedek. So again, when you think of what Christ did, the sacrifice, the blood atonement, all those things had to be done by a high priest. And of course, Hebrews, you know this, but it's all about proving the priesthood of Christ and saying this is why Christ was the ultimate priest. Because he wasn't after the order of the Levite priesthood, he was after the order of the more ancient Melchizedek priesthood, out of which, and you saw it in Joshua, or in Genesis, where Melchizedek blessed Abraham as the possessor of the world. Melchizedek blesses Abraham as the possessor of earth. And the Jews, as we're going to study further, they say this is when Melchizedek passed the priesthood down through Abraham, and it ended up in the Levite priesthood. Okay, so that blessing was meaningful, just like when, if you remember, when Israel blessed his sons, the 12 sons. Do you remember those blessings? I think that's all in Genesis or Exodus. Yeah, I guess it's later in Genesis. But yeah, so those blessings are more than just speaking something over somebody. It's actually passing down purpose and station and authority to the person. So the Jews in their ancient writings talk about this, and that this is, Melchizedek blessed Abram and passed that priesthood down. But it's just interesting how it all connects, and that Christ had to be of that uncorrupted order of Melchizedek to make this perfect sacrifice as the ultimate high priest. Maybe that's part of what we're seeing here. It's just very interesting. I have to take a moment out and say good morning to Hound Jog. It's good to have you. So glad you're here. I hope everything's going great. We're doing King Melchizedek this morning, right now. We're right in the middle of it. Okay, so of Melchizedek in verse 11, it says, of whom, meaning Melchizedek, we have many things to say and are hard to be uttered, seeing you are dull of hearing. This is interesting, guys, because this is where he's saying Melchizedek is apparently a complicated character. Like, there's a lot they could say about him, but he says it's hard to speak it because you are dull of hearing. So the audience in the mid-first century of Jewish Christians, or Jews that were struggling with Christianity, are too dull of hearing to understand all of the detail of who and what Melchizedek was. Do you see that happening there? And he goes on, he says in verse 12, he reinforces this, that they're just not ready for everything. He says, when for the time you ought to be teachers, you have need that one teach you against, which are the first principles of the oracles of God. And you are such that you have need of milk and not strong meat. He's talking about, in reference to Melchizedek, he's saying it's a little beyond you to understand Melchizedek. Okay, so we have to at least see here that maybe there's a lot more to King Melchizedek than just some guy sitting in Salem in ancient history, right? There's something a little bigger, but he doesn't go into detail here really, so it's hard to know more, right? Okay, so then in chapter 6 of Hebrews, it continues. I think this talks more, yeah. Just continues to reinforce in chapter 6 God's promises are certain, all the things that God was going to do, that Christ did them. And that's what it's all of it. It's just confirming Christ's work here. And again, in verse 20 mentions the same thing, Psalms 110 verse 4, whither the forerunner is for us entered, even Jesus. He entered where? Within the veil. So Jesus was made a high priest forever after the order of Melchizedek, so he could do all of that. And so whatever complexity or special nature Melchizedek had, that was part and parcel of what Christ had too, okay? And it allowed, apparently, there's something, I can't even fathom all of it. We don't have all the information, but there's something spiritual about that, I think, that allowed Christ to do everything he did. And that includes, on earth, in the spiritual world, the atonement of his blood for our sin, and all the other things. It just, this is part of God's plan. It's so perfect and so right. And all the puzzle pieces fit perfectly together. That's all I can say about it, is I don't understand every detail of this King Melchizedek, but it was something absolutely special that was part and parcel of Christ himself. But they are obviously in this text different people. See, that's the other thing I want you to see, because so many people get hung up on, was Melchizedek Christ? I don't think that's true. It keeps talking about them in the same passages. Christ is after the order of, he's this, he's that, and then Melchizedek was this. Totally different people. For this Melchizedek, in chapter 7, verse 1, king of Salem, priest of the Most High God, who met Abraham returning from the slaughter of the kings and blessed him, to whom also Abraham gave a tenth part of all, being first by interpretation king of righteousness. So Melchizedek, apparently by interpretation, his name might have meant king of righteousness, and after that also king of Salem, which is king of peace. As I told you, shalom is peace. So he's the king of righteousness, he's the king of peace, without father, without mother, without descent, having neither beginning of days nor end of life, but made like unto the Son of God, abideth a priest continually. Now this is where everyone gets hung up. Everyone gets hung up here, because they're like, what are you telling me? You telling me he wasn't born? He didn't have a father or a mother or descent? Or a beginning or an end? This is so weird. I don't get it. Well, there's weirdness to it, but I want to share more, because if you dig into some of the other sources we're going to talk about, this thing about without father or mother will make more sense. It's not possibly not actually saying he wasn't born or didn't have a father or mother, but that the mother and father may have been unknown. Okay, so anyway, just to tell you, we'll go further and then you'll see more of that. But so let's move forward off of the Bible. Let's move into some of our other sources. So the Kebra Nagast is one that mentions Melchizedek. And I'll just briefly go into that because I don't think it reveals much more information. Let's see. Kebra Nagast, chapter 66. What was my verse there? 2. Okay. Yep. Okay. So let's see, make sure that's big enough for you guys to see. Again, Solomon saying, King Solomon has made a litter for himself. These words are to be interpreted that Christ has put on our body. The name Solomon, in the language of the Hebrews, is being interpreted Christ. And the foolish Jews imagine the words of David. The Lord said to me, etc., etc. Let's see. thy righteousness to the son of the king. He may judge thy people with righteousness and the needy ones with justice. And this is all talking about Christ, even though it mentions Solomon. The Kebra Nagast is an interesting text. It's one like if, like Northbound Believer, your questions about apocryphal works or whatever extra biblical works, this is one that like is low on my list. It's like I like knowing what they said and what these ancient Ethiopians, because it's an Ethiopian book, what they believed. But I don't always take everything in the Kebra Nagast and think, that's truth, you know, and match everything up against it, because it really, there's a lot of anomalies, a lot of different things that are like, I don't know about that. It doesn't sound Gnostic in any way, for instance, but it's just got some interesting stuff. So I use it as a reference point. That's about it. But it says here at the end, I have brought thee forth from the belly before the morning star. God hath sworn he will not change. Thou art a priest forever after the appointment of Melchizedek. So this is again just referencing again in terms of Christ the same verse. It's referencing Psalm 110 verse 4. So there is that. So let's check the other reference, and it's 105:1. Let's see, chapter 105:1. So there's Melchizedek right there. And thou dost not understand that they were justified by faith, Abraham, David, all the prophets, one after the other, who prophesied concerning the coming of the Son of God. See, this is interesting too. I love hearing that. You know, he's saying Abraham, David, and the prophets all prophesied concerning the coming of the Son of God. A lot of people think that there's only very few prophecies about Christ in the Old Testament, one here, one there, a few of the prophets. All of them. It was all about the coming of the Son of God. So it's just cool to see that said. Abraham said, wilt thou in my days, O Lord, cast thy word upon the ground? And God said to him, by no means, his time has not yet come, but I will show thee a similitude of his coming. So this is God, and this is an amazing account if this is true. I don't know if it's true. This is God telling Abraham. Abraham's asking, are you going to send your son, your Redeemer, soon? And God's saying, no, it's not his time yet. It's not yet. But he says, I will show you a similitude of his coming. Get thee over Jordan and dip yourself in the water as you go over, and arrive in the city of Salazim. But this is actually Salem, okay, from the Old Testament, where you will meet Melchizedek, and I will command him to show you a sign and the similitude of him, meaning of Christ. And Abraham did this and found Melchizedek and gave him the mystery of the bread and wine, the same which is celebrated in our Passover for our salvation through the Lord Jesus Christ. This was the desire and joy of Abraham as he went round the altar which Melchizedek had made, carrying branch and palm on the day of the Sabbath. See how he rejoiced, etc., etc. So, this text is giving us an interesting little story to expound on the Old Testament, where it says Melchizedek shared the bread and wine, which I said seemed significant that he would share bread and wine in the Old Testament. That I don't know if that happens very much in the Old Testament. So Melchizedek shares bread and wine with Abraham. This text in the Kebra Nagast saying that was because God had told Abram that he should go to Melchizedek because he was going to give him a sign of the Messiah. And so Melchizedek presented the bread and wine and essentially showed him something, showed him that the Redeemer was going to come. And the bread and wine was the vehicle in which he had that conversation or divulged the information to Abraham. So that's an amazing passage, assuming it could be true. Very interesting. Very interesting. It does seem to have a connection to what happened in the book of Genesis, right? So that makes sense a little bit. So that's the Kebra Nagast, and that's the only references to Melchizedek in that writing. Now to go forward, and this is where it starts to get even more interesting, the book of Jasher, chapter 16. So let's go there. Jasher, chapter 16. And verse 11 and 12. Okay. Oh, this is interesting. So did I even realize that I did this? Or this isn't what I thought, but this is talking about, oh my goodness, guys. You'll see here in verse 16, 11, and 12, in the version I have, it says, Adonizedek, king of Jerusalem, was the same was Shem. He went out with his men to meet Abram and his people, the bread and wine, and they remained there together in the valley of Melech. In verse 12, and Adonizedek blessed Abram, gave him a tenth from all the land, and Abram gave him, rather, a tenth from all that he had brought from the spoil of his enemies, for Adonizedek was a priest before God. What I'm thrown by there is that I thought this was a reference to Melchizedek, not Adonizedek. So give me 1 second on this, guys. All right. Yeah, I had a book, I think is where I looked this up. It's just a book of, it's backwards for you, but it's the book of Enoch, Jubilees, and Jasher all in one volume. And I just want to check this to see if this one also translates that as Adonizedek. And so just to confirm my suspicion, I want to make sure that I didn't misreference this. So Jasher chapter 16, verse 11. All right, so here it is. My eyes are terrible. Yeah, okay, in this version too, it says Adonizedek. But do you see, though, from the text, this sounds like exactly what happened with Melchizedek, okay? And so this is saying literally that this king, the one that met with Abram and gave the bread and wine, and that Abram gave him a tenth from the spoil, number one, this text names it Adonizedek and says that it was Shem. It was Noah's son Shem. And this is also in, by the way, the Jewish Targum and Talmud and all the older Jewish writings too. It has to do with Shem. And so now this is making me wonder if the Adonizedek from Joshua 10 is Melchizedek from Genesis chapter, 14 or whatever. Yeah, Genesis 14. Let's do this. Add Joshua chapter 10 to my list because I don't want to forget that. I'm going to have to compile all this information after we're done because this is really cool. Some of this I'm just coming to right now, but I think this is very interesting. Right, Come Alive, you say Shem had a mother and father. Yes, that's true. Just wait for the next. I'm trying to get there. There's a lot here. There's a lot. And I think the key for me here in all of this is just that it's not what most people think. I don't think that this king was Christ in any regard. I don't think he was at all. And there's too much written about him that suggests, they weren't the same. Related in a way, but not the same. So, all right. So that's the reference from Jasher that says that this Adonizedek may have been Melchizedek as well, and that was Shem, the son of Noah. Very interesting. So let's go to the next. Okay. I found in this writing, this is an Ethiopian writing too, which would be related probably to the Kebra Nagast. It mentions Melchizedek. And in this section of this writing called The Conflict of Adam and Eve with Satan, and this is a URL, you can get to this if you want. There's a lot of Book of Adam and Eve. We've talked about some of them before. There's the Apocalypse of Adam. There's all these different writings that's easy to get confused with. This is called a few different things. Sometimes this is called the Book of Adam, but the Ethiopic version. Or it's also sometimes called the conflict of Adam and Eve with Satan, etc. It's the Ethiopic one. That's the one you have to find if you want to find this. But anyway, Methuselah is talking in a section of this writing. He says, "My son, when about to die, command thy firstborn son Shem to take Melchizedek, son of Canaan, and grandson of Aprashad. For that Melchizedek is priest of the Most High God, and to take with them the body of our father Adam from within the ark, and remove it and lay it in the earth." So this is interesting, giving a different perspective. This is the tough stuff. This is a tough one, right? It's tough to nail everything down because we see some conflicting things in different places. I will say though, I would trust the writing of the book of Jasher a little more than I would trust this writing, but that's just me. I'm not sure that that's based on anything tangible. It's just kind of a gut feel. But anyway, then it says, "And Melchizedek shall stand ministering on that mountain that's in the middle of the earth." This would be, if I understand correctly, this is Mount Zion. Okay, this is essentially in heaven. This is not on earth. "Before the body of our father Adam forever." So the body of Adam, interesting. There's just a lot of connection between Adam and the reintroduction to the Garden of Paradise and heaven and all this stuff. So we can't assume that Melchizedek is on some mountain over in the Middle East somewhere reigning right now as a king priest. That's not happening. But if there's something spiritual about this king, there's a possibility that that is something to do with heaven, okay? It says, "From that place, Noah, my son, God shall..." From that place, Noah, my son. I guess he's speaking. This is Methuselah speaking to Noah. He says, "God shall work salvation for Adam and for all of his seed that believe in God." Now that to me, I don't know about you guys, that to me seems to equate Melchizedek with Christ. And actually, this is the first time I read through this. This was the last reference I found this morning as I was trying to cram for my exam here. So that's interesting. There are some people that say of this writing that they felt like it was a later Ethiopic Christian writing. So there's a possibility of that. I'm not going to come down hard on that. I think that the more evidence is leaning towards other things than, again, for Christ to be Melchizedek or Adonai-Zedek. I don't know. Okay, so that's all the references other than the Jewish views. So I always do this on most of these things. I go to, what do the Jewish people think? Even though, there's a lot of corruption in Jewish religion right now and Judaism, all this stuff, a lot of the ancient ideas came forward. They kept most of them. Anything that didn't conflict, of course, with Christ being the Messiah. So the ancient Targum identifies Melchizedek as Shem. Okay, so that thing we saw in Jasher seems to carry forward, that the Jews somehow do relate Melchizedek to Shem, even in their Targum, the son of Noah. So Shem was one of the links in the chain who transmitted the, quote, godly traditions that originated with Adam. These traditions carefully handed down from generation to generation, and Shem, who headed an academy, was a key conductor of these teachings. Midrash tells us he was so perfect and spiritually advanced, he was born circumcised. Yeah, that's an interesting thing they do talk about, that somehow they feel that Melchizedek was circumcised in the womb or something, or he was born that way. This is interesting. So why did the priesthood pass from him to Abraham's children? This is what the Jews were saying, and I mentioned this to you, that because of the blessing from Melchizedek to Abraham, that that was the passing of the priesthood also, that it was the blessing of being a priesthood that would come out of Isaac's sons and through Levi, right? Anyway, so there you go. And then furthermore on the Talmud, they've long debated, it says Talmudic scholars even debated the identity of Melchizedek. Some believe he was an actual person, some believe he was a myth. This is Jewish belief, so, I take it with a grain of salt. It's fine. Whatever they believe is fine. He is considered to be a model of righteousness and a prototype of the Messiah by Christians, obviously. Well, actually, this was from a Jewish source, so maybe they even see him as a prototype of the Messiah, which would make sense. Melchizedek in Midrash Psalm 37, or PS, whatever that means, that might not mean Psalm, is said to have taught Abraham the practice of charity. And this is all derived from the Torah where we just read in Genesis 14, where he teaches Abraham about giving. He gives the tithe or whatever of the spoils of war. Melchizedek was born. This is another one of the interesting things about this is where the child comes in, and it's it has to do with him not having a mother or father. And this is the only reference I saw that would even say anything about that. So I hope you guys can see that. It's a little small, but let me make that bigger. A little bigger. Melchizedek was born from the remains of Sothonim, a king of Salem, according to the story. And it mentions Hebrews 7, 3-5, but that's not really mentioned specifically in Hebrews 7. So let's just take it for what it's worth. They say it's Melchizedek was born from the remains of a king of Salem, Sothonim. When Ner and Noah arrived to bury Sothonim, they were taken back to see the child, Melchizedek, sitting beside the body, fully clothed and grown up. The child blessed the Lord by saying good night and good morning to him. And then Melchizedek, according to, again, it's referencing Hebrews, where it says that he has no father or mother. It's because he doesn't have a father or mother in his family. So I think that this is where that comes from. They felt like the idea, the almost legendary idea of him appearing beside the body of this Sothonim and then being known to be, the child was blessed by the Lord, and he was then to become this king of Salem. He was fully grown, apparently. So he wasn't a baby when he appeared there. It's a very interesting story. I don't know what to make of this. It's just so, like, do I trust the Targumim? Not really. Not 100%. But some of the things they put in the Targum, the Jews had in their Targum, was true things. Some things are legendary things. It's really hard to know. So I don't know what to say other than there it is. They trying to explain why he doesn't have a father or mother. And who knows? Who knows? The city's first king was known as Adonizedek. And this is saying that actually is Melchizedek. So perhaps we are correct in thinking Adonizedek and Melchizedek the same guy. Philo, who is a Jewish philosopher in the time of Christ, or just before the time of Christ, in the 1st century BC, Philo speaks of Adonizedek or Melchizedek as the Logos. Like, he equates Adonizedek with the Logos. So that's interesting. I've read a lot of Philo, and I honestly agree with some of what he says and disagree with a lot of what he says. He was steeped in that Stoic philosophy out of which the Gnostics came and everything else. So I think some of his conclusions to me are not right. But that would be up for you to determine, if you wanted to read about it. Apparently, this came from his De Allegoris Legum in Book 3, Chapter 26. So, all right. And then I just put the Samaritans identified the city of Salem with their sanctuary on Mount Gerizim. That's interesting, but Samaritans, whether that was correct or not, who knows? It's interesting. All right. So, possible identities. I still feel I'm just going to put... I think these are the possibilities here. And after all we've looked at, I think that's been to me, is super interesting. But I guess this is all we can say at the end. He was either just a great king of that patriarchal period, an amazing time period, which we will never understand. That time period and those kings and the wars against the Nephilim and all that stuff going on, we're never going to understand that until we're in heaven, and maybe he shows us. It's just not going to be something we get. I think that there's a high possibility he might have been Seth. Maybe that's a thing. I'm not sure, but it's an interesting possibility. Now, number 3, could he have been an angel king? There were angel kings at that time. they were, so there's the angel principalities we've talked about of the nations. There's all these different things. So is it too much to believe that this possibly was an angelic king priest that God put on earth for a purpose, and that was to foreshadow the Messiah, give a picture of what would happen? Is that true? I don't know. After all we've read, could it be Christ? I'm really, my jury's out on that. I don't think that Melchizedek was Christ because of the writings that, even old writings like Psalms, like David, where he's saying that the coming Messiah would be after the order of Melchizedek. Why would he be after the order of Melchizedek if he was Melchizedek? To me, that's hard to overcome. Like that's the Bible. It's the writings of David. It has more authority than all the other writings that we read. And it talks about Melchizedek and Christ in the same passage and the relationship between the two. To me, that's pretty heavy evidence that Melchizedek or Adonai-Zedek was not actually Jesus Christ. But I will say this. The things that talks about with the reign of this king priest being forever on the mountain, and that the order of Melchizedek would never fade, those types of things are tough to reconcile with some kind of earthly ruler that was just an earthly ruler. So if it was this angelic ruler that God put on earth for a purpose, I don't know. But that's one way that reign could last forever. That order of priesthood could last forever. I just don't know all of the ins and outs. I think I've given you guys the material for you to at least think about it, look at it. I will say this, and I think what one of you just said, I think it was Northbound Believer. Let's see here in the chat. You say it's all very interesting to speculate about, but I think some things are beyond our understanding too. Yes, I believe that. We have to sometimes understand when we don't understand, and be willing to not understand, and be willing to trust God that it, of course, all fits perfectly together like it seems it does. But because we weren't there, we didn't see this Melchizedek or Adonai-Zedek. We don't know for sure. We don't know everything. We've gotten a few little hints from some other writings that may or may not be true or authoritative. And I'm okay with not being 100% sure. We do know that what I believe is said in the Bible is true. Melchizedek was a king priest of Salem at the time. And whether he was something special or more than a man, I don't know. But that priesthood, that order of that priesthood was pure and righteous, and that Christ was a descendant of that. And that's what made Christ the perfect high priest to do what he did when he came. And we don't have to know all the detail about who Melchizedek was to understand that. And I think that point's made pretty clear by the book of Hebrews, chapters 5, 6, and 7. So I would just say I lean on that, and I don't worry about it too much. I think that he's an amazing person, character that is interesting to learn about. And I think just the understanding of what happened with Abraham and Melchizedek, to me, adds flavor, adds interest to who Christ was and what he did. Obviously, that was the purpose of Melchizedek. As far as God was concerned, it seems like he had something to do with precursing or bringing about some of the things that needed to happen for Christ to be who he was. So, I don't know. That's about all I've got. I think that's super fun, super interesting. And I absolutely had a blast doing that. So, all right. Let me see what our next topic is. Let's get to it. Oh boy. Well, Squiffy Bear, you said it, so let's do it. Usury in the Bible. Did we do this before? I can't remember. Usury in the Bible. I wish I had just a ton of information on usury, but I'm actually going to have to look it up, and we'll have to read a little bit about it. So briefly, let me do a search here. I know that word's in the Bible quite a few times. So Exodus 22:25. Of course, this is in parts of the law that was given to Moses. So we know it's here. It's in the Mosaic law. You shall not afflict a widow or a fatherless child. If you afflict them, they cry to me, I will hear their cry. My wrath will wax hot. I will kill you with the sword. Your wives will be widows, your children fatherless. If you lend money to any of my people that is poor by thee, thou shalt not be to him a usurer, neither shalt thou lay upon him usury. And then it goes on, and that's all that is said about usury. So, if this is the Mosaic law, let's get that in our brains. If you lend money, meaning if you, Jews or Israelites, if you lend money to a poorer person, any of my people, any of the Israelites who are poorer, you will not extract usury, meaning you will not charge interest on that loan. This doesn't say, by the way, in the way it's worded here, we could dig in, but I think it's pretty clear. It doesn't say that you cannot loan someone with interest. It doesn't say you can't do usury. It just is saying if someone is poor, then you should lend to them without usury. That's what this verse says, right? I think that's pretty clear. And I'm not showing it on the screen. I just realized. Oh, it's always something. There we go. All right, so let me get the, there we go. There we go. Okay, that's what I was reading. Yeah, so I hope that's clear. That's, Exodus 22:25. All right. So Leviticus. Let's do Leviticus 25:36. If your brother, in verse 35, waxes poor and has fallen in decay with you, then you will receive him, yea, though he be a stranger or a sojourner, that he may live with you. Take thou no usury of him or increase, but fear thy God, that thy brother may live with thee. Thou shalt not give him thy money upon usury, nor lend him victuals for increase. I am the Lord your God. So this is God saying to the Israelites, if your brother gets poor and he needs your help and he's fallen into decay and he wants money or needs something, even it talks about victuals, meaning sustenance, food, whatever, resources. It says, if you help your brother who is poor, you better not charge usury. You better not charge interest. You don't say you're going to need to pay me back, but a little more than I gave you. Like, I'll give you a basket of bread, and then next week you're going to give me a basket and a half of bread. That would be usury. Okay? He's saying that if your brother is in need, as an Israelite, you can lend to him, but don't ask for usury interest back when you get payment. So that to me is what's being said here. It's pretty clear when we just take it at face value, right? Not adding to it. I don't see it saying usury equals bad, okay? I don't see it saying that. So let's keep going a little further and see what else is in the scriptures about it. Deuteronomy, let's see. Deuteronomy 23:19 says, thou shalt not lend upon usury to thy brother, usury of monies, usury of victuals, usury of anything that is lent upon usury. Unto a stranger you may lend usury, but unto thy brother you shall not lend usury, that the Lord thy God may bless thee in all that thou settest thine hand to in the land whither thou goest to possess it. Interesting. So this one takes out that context. Do you see this? Deuteronomy 23, it removes the context of your brother being poor, okay? It might be still inferred Just because, why would your brother come to you if in need of a loan if he wasn't doing poorly, right? So maybe it's implied, I'm just mentioning that, but it doesn't specifically say, for your poor brother, don't do usury. This sounds more like your brother, Israelite brother, if you lend them something, don't extract interest, okay? So now maybe it expands a little bit, maybe. You could still say that contextually this might have to do with the other, and it means your brother who's in need, but it could also be now kind of expanding to where, just don't do usury, interest, don't charge interest upon your fellow Israelites, okay? Perhaps that's what this is getting at. I'm looking here in the context to see. See, now the context here is, if you read this whole chapter, you'll note that it's talking about people that are kind of in need. So it talks about he that dwells with you, you shall not oppress him, like the stranger. You shall not bring the hire of a whore, the price of a dog into the house of the Lord. Even both these are an abomination to the Lord. See, the hire of a whore. And then it talks further up. I just saw it a second ago. I'll probably not be able. Oh, yeah. Do not deliver unto his master the servant which is escaped. These are all considered like the poorer people groups, okay? And so it talks about all of them and then goes straight into don't lend usury upon your brother to your brother. So it almost seems like it is keeping in context of the poorer individual among you. Don't take interest from them. I'm just feeling that. Okay, I'm feeling that. Just saying. So this is Deuteronomy 23. Let's see what else we've got. In Nehemiah 5:7, it looks like he's upset because people are extracting usury of their brothers. So let's check that real quick. I'll try to go quick through that one. Nehemiah, great cry of people and their wives against the brethren and the Jews. Now our flesh is as flesh of our brethren, our children and their children. We bring the bondage of the sons and daughters to be servants. Some of our daughters brought into bondage already. Neither it is in our power to redeem them, for other men have our lands and vineyards. And I was angry with them when I heard their cry and these words. And I rebuked the nobles and the rulers and said, you exact usury every one of his brother, and I set a great assembly against them. So this is Nehemiah being upset with the nobles and rulers for taking usury from the Jews at that time. So whether this is a match to that law or just related, in fact, that it has to do with usury from between Israelite and Israelite, that seems to be what's being talked about here in Nehemiah. So I know that from what I've heard from and about the Jews now, modern Jews, is they still feel the same way. They wouldn't do interest, charge usury upon each other, but they'll do it to a goyim every day of the week. And they think it's actually now, the modern Jews think it's their right to do that to goyim, to non-Jews, because they think they're supposed to take over the world from all the goyim. They think they're supposed to rule the world in the end. That's what they think the Messiah is supposed to do for them, because they were so mad because Jesus didn't do that for them. Just give them everything, They threw a pity party, sad. Those Jews. What can you say? All right. All right, let's see. What else? Psalm 15:5, he that putteth not out his money to usury, nor taketh reward against the innocent, he that doeth these things shall never be moved. See, he's saying, Psalms is saying how good it is to not take usury, to not take reward against the innocent. Because when someone comes needing a loan, needing to borrow, they are essentially in the transaction lower or poorer than you, no matter what the transaction is. So I'm getting the sense now that I feel like it is about someone being poorer, but that's always the case if someone's looking for a loan. So it almost is like this is King David saying, the one that does not do usury, he is a rock. He is the standard. It's very interesting. Proverbs 28:8, he that by usury and an unjust gain increases his substance, he will gather it for him that will pity the poor. I don't think I'm fully understanding that verse, but I think it means what I think it means. Whoso keepeth the law is a wise son. He that is a companion of riotous men shames his father. He that by usury and unjust gain increases his substance, he shall gather it for him that will pity the poor. Oh, he's saying that the one that uses usury to increase himself unjustly, he will end up in the end gathering money for a man above him that will pity the poor. So someone that actually has pity on the poor is higher and better than the one who extracts usury, is what that's talking about. All right, let's do this. There's some more verses. I don't want to do these in the Old Testament. Let's go to the New. So Matthew 25:27, the master. This is the parable, okay, of the talents, right? So the parable of the talents, he gives one of the servants 1 talent. He gives 1 2, and he gives 1 5, right? When he comes back, the one with 5 had got 10. The one with 2 had gotten 4. The one with 1 buried it, and he was the wicked servant, right? Because he didn't take what was given to him and make something out of it. And of course, this parable is couched in the knowledge of the kingdom. This is all about the time they were in, the first century. Christ wanted to build the kingdom before he came back in 70 AD. So he's telling them, take the talents, take the things you are given and use them. Take them out and build the kingdom. Double it, triple it, whatever you can do, but don't bury it, because then when the master comes back to collect, he will be angry and wrathful with you. Okay, so that's the whole perspective of this parable. So the servant says to the wicked one who buries his talent, he says, "Thou wicked and slothful servant, thou knewest that I reap where I sowed not, and gather where I have not strawed. Thou oughtest have put my money in the exchangers, with the exchangers, the bankers, and then at my coming I would have received my own with usury. Therefore take his talent and give it to the one that has 10. So this is not a wholesale commendation of the practice of usury. Like, this is not Jesus or God saying usury is a great thing. You should always invest your money and get interest. But that was the picture being shown in this parable to explain what should be done with your talents. You should invest them. You should invest the gospel. The gospel was the thing being given at this time. They should have invested that during the time, the 40 years between Christ's ascension and his coming in the clouds. They were supposed to invest those talents for the kingdom. Invest the gospel, invest the word, invest everything, and multiply it. That was the whole point. So this is the context in which this parable is given. Of course, a very normal practice was the same thing that started in, with the Rothschilds in, Europe in the time of Napoleon. They would hold your money, give you a note, and then when you came to get it back, you got some interest because they were able to, quote, use your money. The biggest Ponzi scheme in the history of the universe, right? They were doing the same thing in the temple with the money changers. And so it was a known practice that in the context of the parable helped explain what was supposed to be done with what was given to these Christians at this time. So I hope that helps with the context there. But oh yeah, y'all are all on the goyim and stuff, man. I'm just saying, you can't get away from it. All right. So let's see. In Luke 19:23, it's the same parable. So that to me is, I think, the overarching thing on usury, right? I think, yes, in general, you could say it that Israelites were commanded by Moses not to take usury from one another. When someone came in need to you and wanted to lend or borrow, you weren't supposed to extract usury. Nehemiah echoed that with what we saw, and they were, though, allowed to do it from other nations. Of course, when you think of the Old Testament and what was happening at the time with Israel, and he was taking them through Canaan and they were defeating other nations, it was no big thing for them to extract usury from one of these Philistine nations or something like that. And of course, that wouldn't have been seen as a bad practice. What is bad is taking that by the Jews, them taking it as a charge to, throughout all history and all time forward, to be the money lenders of the earth, to extract usury from every known nation on the planet at the detriment of every nation, to become the one nation that rules all of the planet. That is ridiculous, and that is what they believe right now. So yeah, and man, you need to read the book. You need to find Martin Luther's book, Martin Luther's The Jews and Their Lies. And you will have your eyes opened to what was happening in 14th century Germany with the Jews then, and how that progressed into our current time period, and especially the world wars and everything else. Martin Luther's book, The Jews and Their Lies. Get it. It's online. If you can't stand reading online, get a paperback copy for $2 used on Amazon. And I'm just telling you, it's an eye-opening read. An eye-opening read. You can see how that practice has been consistent with the Jews since the times we're reading about them. Extracting usury from other people groups. It's just something they do. So some of those stereotypes make sense, about the Jews. Stereotypes are there for a reason, right? It's because so many people start thinking those things about that people group or experiencing it, that it's generally just applied as an attribute of the people group. And it's not necessarily untrue, right? Stereotypes are sometimes correct. Let me catch up with you guys' comments. Let me catch up a little before we move on. Time is it? Oh my goodness, it's already 11. What are we doing? We're taking so long. Oh. Come alive. Are you having surgery soon? Oh my gosh. We will be praying for you for sure. Definitely. Take aspirin. Take an aspirin every day. It thins your blood. It'll keep the aneurysm at bay for now. You may already be on stuff. You may already be on thinners and stuff, but I'm sorry to hear that, brother. I hope you're doing all right. I hope that the surgery goes well. And we'll be praying for that. You got a lot of prayer warriors on this chat right now. I hate to say, you may get more prayer than you bargained for. It's a battle with the insurance company. Ugh. Yeah, I get you. Northbound, these live streams always go for it at least 1 to 2 hours since I started attending, but it's always such a great conversation. I look forward each week. Good. I try not to do, we're almost at the 1 hour, 30-minute mark. I feel like that's enough. Gotta stop, man. I took a lot of time at the beginning of this too on that Gnosticism topic. So I think that's where we are. I think, what have we got on the list still? We did two things. We did Melchizedek. We did Usury. Northbound. I think I'm gonna do your apocryphal books next time. I think I'm just gonna push everything else out. So the topics we'll push out are going to be on your screen. It's authority of the apocryphal books. I want to get a list together, doggone it. I keep getting asked this, and I keep saying I'm going to do it, and I don't do it. So next week I will have this. I'll have a list of books that I think are valuable. I also will try to rate them according to how authoritative I feel they are, or how, conflicted they are, whatever. And then Jeriel's topic, he's not here with us, so I'll just hold that till next week. It's a good discussion we can talk about. It's something a lot of Christians hear and don't know much about, whether God intends for us to be wealthy or prosperous, that kind of idea. It's a good question. And then Mama Chose Joy wasn't able to stay online, so we will keep Joshua 10 and the sun standing still for next week. So I think that will be good. Good morning, Sandra Ferenkick. I don't know you. Thank you for joining from Croatia. I appreciate you. Yeah, it's good to have you. I hate to say if you just joined that we're about to finish up, so this will be obviously stay online. You'll be able to watch it back, but thank you for joining. Maybe next time if you can, I'll have to look at where Croatia is and the time zone. So see, I don't know when you're joining. It might be a really horrific time for you. I have trouble getting a perfect time for everybody in all time zones, but it's so nice to see you this morning. Good morning. Okay. Well, guys, it's been a pleasure, and I've enjoyed, especially the Melchizedek stuff. So interesting, so different. And the usury topic was a great topic. Thank you, Squiffy Bear. Thank you all for joining, and I just want to say have a great week. Stay safe. There's a lot of weird things going on. You don't know what might happen. If you do, I would suggest you pack heat wherever you go. Just saying. And take care of yourselves. Protect the ones you love. God bless all of you. And let's try to remember to pray for one another this week. Take care, guys. Bye.